coil plate. It's been, I fitted it all up, and on the inside of the coil plate there's a flange that sits on the inside of the crankcase that I filed that down to a very loose interference fit. If you don't, it ends up that if you have to take that plate back off again, it's very difficult to get that plate off without breaking that plate. There are ways to do it, and but you know, it's tricky and you don't want to ruin that plate. So anyway, this plate has been all gone through. I've addressed all the issues with that plate. The backer plate was removed. The kill switch was removed. Everything basically on this engine has been removed and restored. So inside here, the condenser was still fine. I tested that. It still tests out at 25 microfarads. Points breaker setup is completely new, except for that base plate. The movable part of that breaker point, so your trip arm, that's a new trip arm, new points there. These were already new points, had already been soldered on, so I left them be. There's no need to change that at all. Over here on the coil, this is the second-hand coil I get that's kicking out just over 7,000 ohms, and you'll see in a little bit how it actually makes, hopefully, well, whether it makes spark or not. It tests out that it will make spark, and I've gone through the wiring and it should make spark, so we'll find out. Anyway, you're kind of probably maybe going to look at this and the way I've got my pattern wire hooked up here. Previous, somebody soldered onto that coil on the secondary on your high voltage lead out. I did not want to apply any more heat to that to remove that solder and have a bare loop, so I left it the way it was with the wire that was on it, stripped the wire off down to the core, and basically what I did was just use my butt splicer and butt spliced onto that wire. I really didn't want to call, you know, the coil is not an easy thing to come across, so you know, don't take unnecessary risks, in other words. So I didn't take any unnecessary risks, and I'm gonna leave it that way. It doesn't need to be extremely pretty, it just needs to be functional. It is pretty close to what it needs to be anyway, but we'll leave it that way. The pattern wire, kind of like that pattern wire. I think it's a little more yellow than the stock stuff, but I do like the black and red tracers on it. You can kind of pick up on that. Those are pretty sharp. Left to do would be, I do have to hook up the kill wire, so that's this one right here, and that's going to head down to your point system. That basically just grounds the whole thing. When you hold that down, it just sends everything to ground, sends spark to ground, and just kills it. So anyway, yeah, like I say, that coil plate was completely removed, cleaned, and all the parts reinstalled. The backer plate, everything re-riveted, everything, basically everything done. So that's where we're at on that side. Like I say, on the inside plate has been filed down to a loose interference fit. Goes into a spring for your throttle control. I need to yet make a rod, governor rod, which will go from here to, you can see it back in there. There's a large hole back on the other side. You can see a little better. So that large hole right there. Let's see what else. Obviously, the piston and rod needs to go in. Other than that, the phone does not love focusing, does it? Other than that, we are really close to it. When I reinstalled this, I probably should have had the camera out, but when I reinstalled it, you have to time the from this side. You have to time the valves with the crank. Sorry, the opening and closing of the valve, your exhaust valve. So essentially at that point right there, the bottom of your lobe of your crank would be down about this position, and that would be the top of it would be kind of lining up with that screw there. I'll try and show you when I have it on back apart again, which it will come back apart again, obviously, to put a piston in it. So, and put the gaskets in and all that kind of stuff. But this is just for fitment. This is not the final assembly, obviously. This is fitment to test spark. So anyway, okay, guys. Everything is kind of fitted up. The piston is not in at the moment. I'm just testing to make sure we're generating spark. I have to do a little bit of work yet, a little bit of filing. I'm getting I got a high point on the magneto yet. So I'm going to have to just file a little bit just to get enough clearance. Just because the coil that I put on with the armature that's on it, it's not the one stock to this motor. It's the one for an FH, but you know, sometimes things have to be fitted up a little bit. So I can feel a little resistance there other than the normal magnetism. So anyway, yeah, anyway, backer plate is all installed. Everything is basically installed. You know, it's kind of, if I needed to start really quick, I could probably have it rolling in about an hour, you know, not even an hour, but I'm not in any rush. But anyway, just testing for spark to make sure that we, all the wiring and everything is done. I did go through actually and test everything out, and everything did test out correctly. But you know, this is just kind of the where the rubber meets the road test, if you know what I mean. So yeah, there's that shroud still kind of sitting there. It's ready to be mounted up. So anyway, let's see what we can do about testing, make sure we get spark. So my feeling on the whole thing is that if you're going to have a good spark, you really don't need to wing the flywheel over or wing the magneto and coil and everything over really fast to generate spark. You should be able to just give it a quick movement back and forth, and that in itself should alternate the current in the coil, and that should give you a reasonable spark. If you can do that, then guaranteed when that motor is spinning at 1,000 RPM, or you know, wherever it's going to be spinning at, there should be absolutely no problem in generating spark. So that's usually my little kind of what I use to ferret out any ignition problem at all. You know, that and a number of other tests as well. But let's give that a try. I've got it marked right here. Basically, this is the center point for the poles, and I just need to rock it back and forth, and I should have spark. So let's zoom in on that, and I'll shut a light off for you. Okay, so that's not bad. You guys should be able to see that all right. And I'll just kind of turn that your way and make sure it doesn't ground itself. And we'll shut the light off. Matter of fact, I'll shut a couple lights off because I can see it, but I know when the camera and the resolution turns down, you know, things aren't always really obvious. I'll try not to break my neck here. You can just hear me rocking that back and forth, I'd say. And so there you go. Just rocking back and forth makes a pretty good spark. So, and that's not with a very wide gap. So there you go. So it is safe to say that our ignition system is up to snuff, and we're not going to have any problem with that ignition system, or we really shouldn't have any problem with that ignition system. Yeah. Anyway, talk to you later, guys.